Welcome, Travis.
Joanne, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, for sure. You are such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to networking, both online and offline. And I'm really thrilled to have this conversation with you today. But before I begin, I do want to share a little bit about your background.
Yes, ma'am.
So everybody knows who you are. Travis Chappell is the founder of the top-rated podcast called Build Your Network. I love that your entrepreneurial journey began way back when you were a kid in high school. I think that's really cool. Most entrepreneurs start really early, and you were one of them. When Travis got into college, he actually started a door-to-door sales career. So he's been in sales for a lot of time. The thing I really love is that you discovered so early that hustling your butt off wasn't really the way to go, and you needed to leverage your time. And the other thing that I think you did is so great is that you really knew what your skills and your talents were. And so using those natural skills and talents is how Travis decided to start a podcast. And coupled with the idea that he was so passionate about networking and how to build a network. And so that's how Build Your Network podcast came to be. The Build Your Network podcast has actually been in the top 25 business podcasts in iTunes. And Travis has been able to have conversations with hundreds of incredible business leaders and high influencers. So congratulations to you. And last year, Forbes named his podcast among the top 10 business podcasts to change your life. And I'm certainly a big fan, have been for a couple of years now. I started listening to Travis's podcast a couple of years ago, and I'm a member of his Facebook group because he has been so aligned with what I've been teaching for years around building a network and networking and using LinkedIn as a tool to connect and engage and grow your network. So we are kindred spirits for sure. And I just love everything you're talking about. And I'm so thrilled to have you here today, Travis. So welcome.
Joanne, man, that was one of the best intros anybody's ever done for me. So I appreciate that. I feel like I don't even need to be here anymore.
Well, you really, for a young guy, Travis, you really are talking about such an important piece of a life skill and a business skill.
Yeah.
So I just love everything you're talking about. So let me jump in.
Okay, let's do it.
With some things that are really going to be important to my audience. And so the first thing was, and I've listened to you for a long time, so I kind of know where I want to focus. And I've heard you talk about this before in terms of how people just focus on sales or marketing, and everything is very transactional. Right? From the get-go. And so I really want you to comment on the real importance of building genuine relationships. Not that we don't need sales and we don't need marketing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and I think I have a unique perspective on this, Joanne, because of my background in door-to-door sales. Because I think a lot of people kind of look down on cold calling and they look down on salespeople. The more that I get into kind of like the networking world and the biz dev world, a lot of those people would like look down on some of like the the hardcore closers and the real pavement pounding salespeople. And so I think I have a unique perspective because I don't see those things as contradictory and bad. I see networking and sales going hand in hand in a lot of ways. And it's just context. It's all about context. And the problem is that a lot of those people treat networking as if it is door to door, as if it is a like in-person cold calling opportunity. And that's exactly what you're talking about, right? Which is those transactional people that are clearly only at the event to try to book business at the event. They're walking around, puking out an elevator pitch all over everybody they talk to. Don't give a chance for anybody to say anything to them. They toss a business card in their face, ask them if they want to do business. If they say no, or if they're questioning it at all, they move on to the next person. And you could argue that, sure, you could get results from that, but it'll always be short term. It'll always be short term. And exactly what you were saying, at the beginning of this, which is I realized I didn't want to be hustling my butt off 24/7 for new business all the time. And that's exactly that realization. And that's the hamster wheel that people are on when they're stuck in that version of networking, is that, yeah, sure, you might get somebody, but the people that you're attracting into your network at that point are people who are people who resonate with that type of a taker mentality of not giving but taking. And so when you surround yourself with a bunch of takers, you can easily get sucked out of all of the energy that you have to go create and do the good things in your business. And that's when you really run into like a lot of burnout, because you're doing all these activities, and sure, you're booking business every once in a while, but then you got to go out next Friday and book more business, because the people that you just booked business with are takers, and they're not looking to continue to give you business. Like, they're looking to get business of their own. And so it's just this just constant hamster wheel. And really, it's not really your fault. It's not our fault. Like, I did the same thing when I first started. It was just because there's not a lot of good information out there about how to do it the right way. And it seemed like all the people that were doing it the right way didn't ever talk about how to do it the right way. They just did it. And they figured out really early on that wasn't the right way to do it. And they adjusted really quickly, but then they never told everybody what they were doing, and I found that to be true. It was just when I got started in all this, all the people that I wanted to meet, all the connections that I wanted to make, I started realizing that none of those people were ever at the networking events. They weren't at the cocktail mixers. They weren't, putting name tags on and going to a dinner on Friday evening and walking around with 1,000 business cards. They weren't doing any of that, but they still knew each other. They still all knew each other. All those high-level people were familiar with each other and networked with each other and had relationships with each other. So I knew that they were still networking, right? It's not like they just didn't do it. It was just they were doing it in a different way. And so I kind of set out from the beginning of my show to figure out what was that way. How are they doing it that nobody else is figuring out?
Yeah, and that's what you're doing really well. And that's a piece that I think is so often missed in today's world, particularly online and offline, which I want to chat with you about too. But so to build meaningful relationships, you're always talking about adding value first. And,
Sure.
and I totally believe in the same concept of adding value first. But so with that said, I've heard you say this, and so I think this is a great conversation to be having. And that is, you've always said, don't ask somebody how you can add value to them.
Yeah.
Because first of all, it's annoying. And secondly, you really should be doing your homework first.
Yeah. And
right?
Really,
isn't that right?
Sure. Yeah. And great question. It really comes down to what's the attitude? What's the impression that you're giving that person when you're offering value? The whole premise of offering value is the caveat to that, offering value, and the caveat being without the expectation of receiving anything in return. And that's a really important caveat to add on to get into that. And so when you go up to somebody and you say, how can I add value to you? It just comes across with a disingenuous attitude of saying, like, I want to add value to you because I know you have value that you can give back to me. And you're almost entering this informal verbal contract when you agree to let that person offer value to you. And as somebody who's really busy and has a lot of demands on their time, it's not an attractive thing to do. So you think that you're doing the right thing by going to somebody, how can I add value to you? But in essence, you're just telling them, like, I want something from you. Therefore, I'm going to try to do something for you for free so that I can ask for something from you later on in the future. And whether or not you actually mean that, that's how they're taking it. I can almost guarantee you. That's one of the questions I've asked a lot of guests on my show is, what's the worst thing that somebody can come up to you and ask? And that's the response that I've gotten the most from that question is, oh, I hate when people come up to me and ask me how they can add value to me. And these are like big time business influencers that speak a lot of events, and people come up to them all the time. And this is one of the questions they get asked. How can I add value to you? It's not their job to figure out how you can add value to them. It's your job to figure out how you can add value to them. If you're just asking for them how you can add value, you're basically just giving them a piece of homework, because now they got to be like, okay, well, what do I need right now? All right, I need some graphics designed. I need a website for this new product launch. I need a funnel, and I need some emails written. And then it's like, okay, so now what do you do? Okay, are you good at it? How long have you done it? Do you have any recommendations? Or like it's this whole entire like homework process that you've just like had to set them on so that you could quote unquote add value. That's not adding value. That's just taking more of their time, and they're not going to do it, and that's why it doesn't work. So you have to be able to like get to that person and then do enough research to find out what they need, what their desires are, and then ask yourself, how can I add value to this person? What do I have to offer to this person? So that's what I tell people to do, is like, look at that person's desires, look at what you have to offer, find the areas that overlap, and then that's your sweet spot. That's your value add.
So can you give an example of using yourself personally, how you added value to someone? I've heard some of the stories, but I want you to share it.
Yeah, sure. And I'm sure you've heard this story because it's one that I use very often for this particular example. And that was when I was first getting started in the online world, and I wanted to get around now a friend and mentor of mine who at the time I was just a big fan of, and that was Lee Dumas. He runs a podcast called Entrepreneur on Fire. It's gotten like, I don't know, over like 60 or 70 million downloads in the time that he's been running the show. And he's wildly successful with it, makes a few $1,000,000 a year, living in Puerto Rico, and he got time freedom and location freedom and financial freedom. And his net to gross profit margin ratio is insane. Like when he makes 100 grand, like he keeps like 80 to 85 in profit. It blew my mind. By the way, anybody can go read his income reports. If you're listening to this and you're interested in that, you can go to eofire.com and look at all of his income reports. He publishes them on a monthly basis so you can see what he's doing. And I remember reading all that and going like, man, I got to meet this guy. I gotta learn from him, because if you can learn from the best, you can become the best. And from that point was just looking for an opportunity to get in front of him, because he didn't offer one-on-one coaching anymore at that point. He was already done with that. And so I was like, man, what can I do to figure out how to get in front of this guy, get in touch with this guy? And so the answer was, he was hosting a mastermind at his house in Puerto Rico. There was about 5 people that were allowed to be there, and there was a hefty price tag. It was a weekend mastermind, and it was $6,500 plus my own airfare and all that stuff. It was $8,000 weekend, was all said and done. And I knew that if I went out there, I would need to not just pay for his time, but I would need to differentiate myself from the others that were there and try to really add value to him so that I could build a relationship after the event, so that it wasn't just like next event I see him at, he's like, oh yeah, this is Travis. He paid to come to my house one time. It was more like, hey, this is Travis. He's a buddy of mine who does X, Y, and Z, because I've actually built a real relationship with the guy. And so I went out to Puerto Rico, and I was looking for that value add the whole time. And to give you an idea of how much I was looking for it, I had a background in photography at the time, and they have a beautiful home in Puerto Rico with an infinity pool, like overlooking a gorgeous, beach, scenery and stuff like that. And I just thought, what if I brought my camera out, and then what if I go buy a drone? I can get some really nice drone footage of their house. I can take some pictures for them, and like, that'll be my value add. That'll be the way that I, give a little bit more than I took if I could. Right. And so I go out and I buy this drone, like a $1,200 or $1,300 drone, and go down to Puerto Rico. And the first night I took the drone out to get some practice with it, because I'd never really flown it. And I took it out, and it was gorgeous, overlooking like the Puerto Rico sunset on the beach, like right at the perfect time. And I was recording some video, and it was just like, man, this is amazing. This is going to be some really awesome footage that I get for their house. And I go to land the drone on the roof. It was a rooftop of a condo, and it was such a tiny spot, and I didn't know what I was doing. And so, which some of you may already have guessed where I'm heading with this, but basically the drone was landing, and I thought it was way more precise of a landing, like an autopilot landing, than it was. Mm-hmm. It was like, it required way more manual landing than I thought it was going to. And right. It was just such a tiny space. And so I was going to land it. The propeller hit a plant that was on the roof, and then it caught it and spun it into the wall, and it snapped 2 of the propellers right on the drone. And so there went my entire plan of like trying to add value through taking pictures for them. Luckily, I bought a couple replacement blades, put them on the drone, and I returned it, and they never said anything, so I got my money back. But that kind of gives you an example of how the extent that I went to try to add value without being asked for anything and without expecting anything in return. So I was kind of screwed at that point, but throughout the weekend, I just kept looking for an opening. Like, what can I do? What can I do? Where can I bring Where can I bring value? And this is the reason I use this story in particular as an example, because of how difficult it was for me when I first started to try to add value to somebody like him. He was an established business person. He made millions of dollars. He had way more connections than I did. He'd done like 2,000 podcast episodes with some of the top people in the entire space. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like the Gary Vaynerchuks, the Tim Ferrisses, the Damon
Yep.
Johns, like the top, the best of the best. Had
Yeah.
more connections, had more money, had more knowledge, had more experience, like had more everything than I did. So what can I do to offer value? What I did have was a little bit of knowledge around sales, and I had time. Which is something that somebody like that doesn't have a lot of, right?
Yep.
And so
Right.
he had mentioned that he was going to be at this event, and he was keynoting at it, and he was setting up a booth to sell some of his journals that he had written, and he had a guy that was going to work that booth for him. And he was like, do you mind stopping by the booth for like 10 minutes and just like give him a couple pointers on how to close people, and because I'd worked trade shows selling the products that I had sold door to door. And so I was like, John, I'll just work the booth for you instead of just train the guy. So I volunteered 3 days of my time, paid for my own travel to get out there, and spent 3 full days, something that I could charge a lot of money to different people for, because I had a lot of experience in it, and I'd made a good amount of money and trained people on how to do that exact thing. And I did it totally for free. Didn't expect for anything, didn't ask for anything. What allowed me to do was build a better and closer relationship with John and his girlfriend, Kate. So then they asked me to come to another event with them in that like 2 or 3 months later that he was also keynoting at. And so I went to that event. I helped him out there, which allowed me to be able to build a better relationship with him. Plus the introductions that he made for me while I was like there as a friend of his were way more powerful than me just going up to somebody and shaking their hand and saying, "What's up?"
Right.
So,
Exactly.
So I say that story to say that like you always have something to offer. Whatever that thing is it time? Is it knowledge? Is it resources? Is it, is it a connection? Is, whatever it is. And the further along your journey that you get, the easier it will be to add value to people. Because now I don't have to work as hard to add value to John as I did when I first started. You know what I mean? I can make a key intro for him with my network that I've built. Like I can make a referral that will make him a lot of money because I have a client that is a high ticket client that needs something that John has. Like there's a lot of different ways that I can add value to him now with like 5 minutes of my time instead of taking 3 full days and volunteering 8 hours a day to like hawk journals. You know what I mean? Like, so I say that just to say, you can always do something. Just find what that thing is. Look at what their desires are. Look at what they're doing. Look at, are they promoting something right now? Are they trying to sell a bunch of something right now? Do they just want people that are engaged in their community? Do they, like there's so many ways to do it totally for free without spending a bunch of money and without, going into debt or without, racking your brain for days. Like there's so many ways to add value to somebody and get in front of them and be perceived as a valuable person. And so you just got to figure out what those things are. And if that person's valuable enough connection to you, then it's worth doing all those things to build a good relationship with that person. I highly recommend making a list of people that you want to connect with and build relationships with and add value to, and then strategically saying, what do they want? What do I have to offer? And how do I reach out to them and let them know that it's something that I'm willing to do? Because and by the way, if you can make that list of people a really connected list of people, that's even better. Because if you can build really great relationships with 10 connectors, then you can have access to hundreds of people in your network that you never would have, been able to do on your own if you just manually went through the process.
Right. And I agree with that. I think too many people, anyway, they tend to collect names that they don't ever build relationships with people.
Right.
So first of all, there's no value in that, in a relationship you're not willing to build, right? And so going deeper with those core relationships is what I hear you saying is going to open doors to other people. And so, so you've already given us several really great ideas in terms of how to open doors. Is just what I hear you saying is just figure out ways to add value. Because adding value actually is going to open the doors to those most valuable relationships, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. And so, but let me add to that one other thing, and that's maybe you could share a couple of ideas on how to reach out to some of the busier people that you might want to get in front of and actually get a response from them? Do you have a couple of tips there?
Yeah. Biggest tip on that is use Instagram direct message. Use Instagram direct message. And it really just depends too on the people that you're trying to get in contact with, because if there's a bunch of like corporate executives that you're trying to reach out to, then LinkedIn's probably a better tool than Instagram DM would be. But I find that not a lot of people are using DMs on Instagram, and it's one of the most effective ways that I've been able to get in contact with people. So that's a super practical, really tactical tip there, is use Instagram DM to your advantage. Some people will never see it. Some people will never read it. Some people will respond. Some people's team responds. But the people who do, and you can actually get in contact with them, like I've booked some pretty high profile interviews just by doing Instagram DM outreach. So use Instagram DMs to your advantage. The other thing that I would say is keep it short and sweet. Anybody that's busy doesn't have time to, like when I first started, I wanted to make sure they had as much info as possible to differentiate myself and prove my credibility and legitimacy and why they should take time to spend with me. But at the end of the day, they got 100 other emails in their inbox that they're trying to clear out. So when they see an email that's just paragraph on paragraph on paragraph, they're probably just going to skip it or send it to their assistant and get it out of their inbox and move on to the next one. So keep it short and sweet. If you can say it in less than 100 words, say it in less than 100 words. If you can say it in less than 50 words, say it in less than 50 words. But keep it short and sweet, and make the subject line somewhat intriguing.
So what would you say in a Instagram DM? Give me an example.
Yeah,
because you don't have a lot of space.
Sure. I always start with value. I always lead with value, meaning that I'm going to make sure that they know that I like what they do, or I've consumed some of their information or some of their content, or read their book, or studied their work, whatever it is that they've done. I want to make sure that they know that this isn't just like a templated message that I blasted out to 1,000 people. So I'm going to start with something personal, call them by name. Usually I do it on a video, which is even better, because there's no automating that. If I'm on a video and I'm saying, "Hey, Joanne, what's up? This is Travis." Like, it's very personal. You know that I filmed that just for you. So, so I lead with value. I say something like, I just finished reading your book, and man, I love that part about X, Y, and Z. I already put that in my business, and it's working wonders for me. So it's like really well done. And then I move into information. I give them some quick information. My name's Travis. I run a top 25 podcast called Build Your Network. And then I give them a link to my website there. I used to write down a ton of info right there. What I really want to do now is keep it short and sweet, and then give them a website in case they want to go read further. If they want to go read further, they can read a bunch of stuff on my website, but I'm not going to take all that space in a message to try to say all that stuff.
Agreed.
So then I say that, and then I move on to a credibility building right away, which is basically for me naming all the guests that I've already had on the show. So I'll go to their Instagram profile, look to see who they're following, and then I'll list off all the guests that I've had on that they're following, so that I know 100% for sure that they're familiar with all those people. And then I go into the request, which is, I would love to add you to the lineup sometime. Please feel free to reply back with a date and time, or to make it easier, just use this scheduler, and I'll chat with you whenever you book. And then I always end it with a thanks in advance. So thanking them in advance for something that they haven't done. It's just, a little extra subconscious trigger to try to get them to do the task. Because if you already thanked somebody for something, it creates an open loop that they want to close subconsciously. And will it double your response rate? Probably not. But, will it give me an extra 5% chance? Sure. And why not do that? So I always end off with a thanks in advance, or I know your time is valuable, so thank you in advance for getting back to me. I really appreciate it. And then I'm done. So that's my quick 5-step process there.
Right. And you can use the exact same process if the person you're connecting with if their LinkedIn is their platform versus Instagram. Sure. Same thing. You can certainly look to see who they're connected to and use the same strategy you just mentioned. So it works on any platform, but I appreciate that, on Instagram DMs, you don't want to go on and on and on and on. Yep.
Yeah. You want to keep it short, sweet, to the point.
Exactly. So,
and that's one big reason too, to beef up your social media profiles, whichever one you're reaching out on the most. That's why if you look at my Instagram, that's probably my best social media profile, because I use it so much for outreach that I want it to be the most credible thing that I have. So when people come into it, they see that, oh, wow, all my friends are following this guy already. Oh, wow, he's got 30 something thousand followers. Okay. Like this, at least they take me a little bit more seriously. Like they know me to be more legit at that point. Like my bio is really, step by step, proves credibility, has a call to action. It's like crystal clear. It's professional. My Instagram feed's professional. There's commenting, there's liking, there's a lot of stuff that's going on there. So I try to make sure that that's really credible. So if LinkedIn's your platform of choice, you better make sure that your LinkedIn profile is hitting all the check marks, that everything is beefed up there, because you don't want an executive to come to your LinkedIn account after you reach out to them. Your message could have been perfect, but then they look at your account and like it's a picture of your cat as your profile picture, and you have 17 connections, and your website address isn't even on there. It's just going to remove all the credibility that you just gave in the reach out message.
Absolutely. So, it's all about personal branding is what you're really saying. And, that's a whole nother topic, but right. If you want to be perceived as credible, you better update your personal branding on all platforms, on your website, everywhere. Right.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Because in today's world, people are checking us out online before they check us out offline.
Mm-hmm.
So it is really important. So I believe you should always have a purpose and goals for a network, because ultimately it saves you time. And so adding to that, could you offer maybe 3 tips on networking smarter and not harder, with having specific goals in mind in terms of building a network?
Yeah, I'll even do you one better, and I'll just make it one tip that will move the needle more than anything else. I promise you. One tip to move the needle in your network more than anything else is to start your own platform. 100%. Build your own platform, meaning start a podcast, start a YouTube channel, grow a meetup, do a Facebook live show. Like doing your own show, building your own platform in some way is going to help you build your network in a way that you never expected would be possible. I'm a huge fan of podcasting. I think it's the most efficient and effective tool, obviously, or else I wouldn't be doing as much as I am in the space. But YouTube can be just as effective, or doing a local meetup can be just as effective. It really just depends on like what your business is, what the style of business is, who your ideal customer is, who your ideal client is, how you are currently getting them into your system and into your world. All that kind of goes into it on which one would be best. I say podcasting is the best one overall for a couple different reasons, but the answer to the question is for sure do one of those things. Like you have, like if you have something like that, then you are building a way for you to connect with people, and it gives you the perfect excuse to connect with people that you want to connect with. So like some people you may have on a list that you're like, man, I would love to connect to that person, but I just don't know what I would say. Like, and that prevents a lot of people from reaching out to like their quote unquote heroes, because they just don't know how they're going to, like, what am I going to say to that person? If they respond back to me, I'm just going to be like, you are awesome. And then that's it. Right. So having a show.
That is so huge what you just said, because I get that question all the time. People don't know what to say.
Yeah. Yep. And that's the perfect request right there. That's I always like, I go through that 5-step script, and in that meaningful request part, people who don't have podcasts or shows are like, well, but you're asking to be on your podcast. What's my request? And it's like, well, I don't know. You have to reverse engineer that for yourself. It can't be a huge request. So you got to come up with something that's more of like a little bit of a value add, where you can also make it worth their time to say yes to it. It's just a little bit more complicated. Whereas if you just had a show, you could connect with them with the excuse of, hey, I just want to talk with you on my podcast, or I want to talk to you on my YouTube channel, or whatever. I put out a show, I do a blog, whatever. Like it gives you the perfect excuse to be able to reach out to those people. And by the way, it really works. I remember the first like 2 weeks that I had my show, I reached out to a couple of people that were pretty big names in the space. One of them, probably a lot of your audience would know, which would be Ivan Meisner. He's the, CVO, I think now, but he's the founder of BNI, and, the father of modern networking, CNN calls him. And so I was like, I should probably get him on the show. Right. So I reach out, and him and another guy that was big in the online influencer space. And I said more or less a similar message to both of them, basically like, hey, can I get 3 minutes of your time? I want to ask you a quick question over a phone call. Both of them said no. But when I replied back and said something about the podcast, both of them agreed to come on the show. So they said no to a 3-minute phone call where I would ask them one quick question, but they said yes to a 30 to 45-minute interview where I could ask them as many questions that I wanted to and share that episode and build my name and credibility by putting myself on the same platform as Ivan Meisner or this other guy. So that was like a magical moment for me, realizing like, oh, wow, this is a lot more than just creating content. This is a powerful tool to help me get in the room with people that normally would just say no right off the bat.
And at that time, you didn't have a big following.
Right. And I didn't have a bunch of guests to impress them with my credibility. And like what I was just saying, like I didn't have any of that at the beginning. So
the real gold here that I hear from you is that anybody can start.
Yeah, totally. I had a very, very, very small network when I started all of this. Like before my podcast, the most successful person that I had a relationship with was making about $150,000 a year. Like that was the most successful person that I knew. I never even like met 7-figure entrepreneurs, let alone like had 50 of them in my recent text message conversations. Like that just wasn't at all what it was for me. And now it's insanely easy to connect with 7-figure people and build relationships with all those people because of the lineup that I've had on my show and all through the podcast.
Yeah, fabulous. So I mentioned a few minutes ago that, we are oftentimes meeting people online before we meet them offline. This is just the world we live in today, right? Mm-hmm. And so can you offer a couple of tips for being very intentional? First of all, about deepening your connections with your online network?
Yeah, so online specifically?
Yeah, first online.
Yeah, so there's multiple tools. You would be really big in LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a great spot. Facebook is also still a great spot, and Instagram that would be my top 3. Yeah, go ahead. And
so how would you approach deepening your connections with people you only know online?
Yeah, one-on-one phone calls. Phone calls, which is a big thing that I preach in my Facebook group, which I'm sure that you know.
Yes.
We push basically whenever we welcome new members and all that stuff, we always push for everybody in the group to create their own scheduler link, whether that's in Acuity or Calendly or one of these other software programs. I always recommend Calendly because it's the one that I use. But essentially people just in the group post their link and they hop on one-on-one phone calls with each other. And it's been the most revolutionary thing that we've done in my Facebook group because people are connecting with each other, which gives them more of a reason to be in the community. When one of them comes out with a book or one of them launches a podcast or a YouTube episode, everybody is so supportive of each other because they have a relationship that extends beyond a profile picture. And you know what I mean by that? Like when you meet somebody in person and you're shaking hands and then like 5 minutes into the conversation, you realize that you already know each other, that you're already connected on Facebook or LinkedIn or something. You just didn't know it because all you know them as is their profile picture and they're wearing a different outfit than they were wearing in their profile picture right now. You know what I mean? So like, you don't really know. But if you,
or the problem is they have old pictures, and so you meet them and they don't even look the same.
It's like 10 years old. Yeah, exactly. Like they were overweight in that last picture, and they had a beard, and like now they're like bald and skinny, and it's like, well, you don't look anything like that person. But yeah, so I always recommend those one-on-one phone calls. It just humanizes the person. If you can do it on Zoom, if you can do FaceTime or Google Hangouts or something like that, where you can see
Zoom,
face, even better. Yeah, Zoom or Skype or whatever. Jump on a call, chat with them for just 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, just a quick chat about. I think that's how you and I first got connected, Joanne. Was just a quick.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, it was just like hey, let's just chat for a second, and so we did, and now we've stayed connected, and now I'm on your show. Like that's just how it works. You got to take those online connections and turn them into real connections, real personal relationships.
So would you offer any different advice for cultivating your offline connections?
No, not really. I guess the answer is it depends on where you're trying to build your network. For me, it's pretty global. Like anybody can listen to my show. Anybody can join my programs. Anybody can get into what I'm doing. They don't have to be in Las Vegas, which is where I live.
Right.
If you're a brick and mortar, coffee shop, then you probably want to spend a lot of time in your local community, which means going to a lot of local meetups, going to you're joining your chamber, getting around like the local business community in your area. So the strategy might be a little bit different, but at the end of the day, it's all about those relationships. So I would always try to follow up with people when you meet them in person. Try to book a phone call with them and just chat for a couple of minutes. You should have at least 5 of those types of phone calls every single week. Just 5, no agenda, just get to know you phone calls. Not like you're not trying to sell them, they're not trying to sell you. It's just like you both get to know each other and see how you could possibly help each other. And then doing that will help you stay connected with those people.
Yeah, it's so important, in today's world, because so much is done online that we've lost this human connection.
Yeah.
And so I think what you're suggesting really is brilliant. You have to go beyond the connection, right? I mean, or there's no value in it.
Yeah, right.
How many followers do you need? If you never intend to do anything with them?
Yeah, right.
It's kind of a waste, really.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to build those relationships with those people.
Yeah. So I love that you said, nothing will make you successful faster than the right people. And so with that said, why should we invest in networking and have a budget?
Yeah, because exactly what you just said. There's no faster way to reach success in the area that you're trying to be successful in than having relationships in that area. If you can get to know the people at the top of your industry that are operating at the top, the very highest level of what you're trying to be successful in, and you can hang out with those people and learn from them and get to know them and look at the road that they walked and walk the same road, then you're going to shortcut your path to success in a tremendous way, shaving off years of learning curve. I just talked to a guy yesterday who was talking about this and was like, I wish I would have just gotten to know people that were successful in my industry at the very beginning, because he tried to bootstrap it and tried to figure it out on his own. He spent $200,000 in like courses and things like that and events, but he was going just for the knowledge. He wasn't going for the connections or the network. He was just trying to get knowledge and knowledge and knowledge. And it's like, okay, but at some point you got to take action. And how do you know you're doing the right thing? Well, like and you can do it either way. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, this guy is still a successful guy today, but he was acknowledging that if he would have started at the beginning with just getting in touch with the people who were crushing it at the highest level, that he would have shortcut the process by a couple of years. And that's when I look at, investments that are heavy investments and high investments for things like masterminds and coaching and mentorship. And it's like, man, this is a hefty investment, but it's really what I'm looking at is it going to help me shave years off of the learning curve? Because if I can shave 1 or 2 years off of a learning, I can do a lot in 1 or 2 years. And so if I'm doing a lot of the right stuff in 1 or 2 years, instead of a lot of the wrong stuff, where I have to, at the end of 2 years, I have to go back and start where I began because it turns out I was doing the wrong thing, but now I know the right thing and I do it, I can still be successful, but it's just going to take me 5 years instead of 2 years. I think it's always long-term. You always have to think with the end in mind, and you have to think long-term. But if you want to shortcut that version, I think the best way to do that is just to get around the people that are doing it at the highest level and learn directly from them. It's just, it's not refutable in my opinion. There's a lot of case studies out there of people who've even just had jobs working for people that are insanely successful in what they do, and then they've gone out and created their own thing and been ultra successful right off the bat because they knew exactly what to do, because they were working for the guy that just done it at the top of their space for the last decade. You know what I mean? Like a perfect example would be Amy Porterfield. She was on Tony Robbins' marketing team when they transitioned all of his stuff from regular advertising, traditional TV and media and radio and all that stuff. And she helped his team transition all of that to online marketing. And so she was in the room with Tony Robbins, and then the top online marketing business minds of that era, which would be the Frank Kerns, the original gangsters, the OGs of online marketing. She was in that room, learning from them when they were consulting Tony Robbins on how to take his stuff to market. And so she helped with that transition. She broke off, did her own thing. Now she's wildly successful, runs a multi-7-figure business off of everything that she did during that process. And she was getting paid to do all of it. She didn't have to go to school to learn it. She just got in with somebody who was crushing it. and was a competent worker who was ambitious and willing to learn. And she took all of that knowledge and she was able to do her own thing, branched off and make millions and millions of dollars and be ultra successful doing it. So you gotta get around the people that are doing it the best and just learn from them.
And I think, when you're around successful people, they're more generous than you think they are.
Yeah.
They're just people like you and me, right?
Totally. And they're looking for kindred spirits.
Yes.
They want to help people. The society paints this picture of successful people being a bunch of jerks, but in reality, they're not. A lot of people just criminalize them and because they are, upset that they didn't take that path and become ultra successful themselves. And so they make it seem like that person, they're just greedy and they're just mean and they're just a jerk because, there's no way they'd be able to get to where they are without it. And so a lot of people have that idea of successful people or rich people or people with a lot of money or wealth or whatever. In reality, they're some of the hardest working and helpful people that there are. They're just not going to help. They're not going to give handouts. And that's what people want. They want handouts. They don't want real help. And so if you can be somebody who just wants the help and you'll actually do the things that they say, you'll actually read the books that they suggest, you'll actually go do the actions that they suggest you do, like they're going to see that and they're going to be like, hey, this kid actually is learning stuff and moving forward and taking my advice and actually acting on it. And that's what makes those people want to spend more time with you, because you're actually doing those things and they want to have a piece of your success. They want to have an impact on your life. Like that's something that they crave. That's something that we all crave. It's within us. It's built within us to have significance and impact others. And so those people do it at the highest level and they want to do it. You just got to be the right person, because and I'm experiencing this on a smaller scale now with all the people that reach out and ask for a bunch of advice, and I give them advice and take my time freely to do it. And then 80% of them don't ever do what I say. And it's really annoying. It's like, well, why am I giving you a bunch of free? Why am I taking my time to do that? And so now I don't do it as much, and it sucks for the 20% that actually do it. But it's 80% of my time that's wasted on the people that just aren't willing to help themselves. They're just looking for a handout. And so if you're somebody that's willing to help yourself and you're ambitious and you're willing to put in the work and you got the work ethic and you have the thirst for learning and the knowledge and you're willing to implement all those things, then people are going to be willing to help you. And maybe not every single person that you come in contact with, but eventually you'll find somebody that's going to help you and actually wants to help you.
Well, the interesting thing, Travis, is, I've listened to probably every episode on your podcast.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And what I find very interesting about the guests, and these are all very high level people, by the way, they're very generous. And particularly when you talk to them about their backstories, right? And how many of them have and continue to be very free with their advice and their help. And so to what you just said, people are approachable. Mm-hmm. And if you're willing to invest, for example, in going to a conference, right? Mm-hmm. And with this person that you admire and you want to learn from, they're very approachable.
Yeah.
And
totally.
So when you're investing, this is why I wanted to have this conversation about investing in your networking, investing in your growth, because, when you're willing to actually put money and invest in yourself, the people you're investing in reciprocate.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's the law of reciprocity. It's always going to come back.
Exactly.
It's always going to come back. And it might not be from that particular person, by the way. Like some people get upset because it's like, well, I added a ton of value to this person that never did anything for me. It's like, well, that's why you can't have those nonverbal, implied contracts in your head. Because you're just going to end up in disappointment sometimes. You just have to trust that the universe is going to give it back. Universe, God, whatever you're going to call it, it's going to come back on you, because the law of reciprocity is always going to reign true. If you help enough people get what they want, you can have everything that you want.
And all Zig Ziglar, right?
Zig Ziglar.
I know. I think you are absolutely correct. And when you go into situations with an open heart and you go with the intent of learning, you're right, it does come back to you. Yep. So I love that part, but I think it's so important that you make the investment in yourself by whether it's paying to go to a conference or you had one last fall, your first in-person event. I think those are powerful investments to make in ourselves.
100% agree. Yeah. Anytime you make an investment in yourself, you're subconsciously betting on yourself. And when you bet on, I do this all the time when my friends and I get together and watch fights, like a bunch of boxing matches. Usually I'm not a big enough boxing fan to know all of the undercards, like all of the pre-fights to the main fight. And so what I do to make it fun for me is we just put like $5 or $10 on the fight. And I just pick like, hey, you got blue shorts, I got red shorts or whatever. And we'll just bet on it, because when you bet on something, you're subconsciously rooting for that person now. Like now when a fight that I had zero interest in, 5 minutes before, now I've got $10. It's not even a lot of money at all. It's just $5, $10. It makes me invest in the fight and like rooting for one of the people. Right. And the same thing happens when you invest into yourself, is you're just rooting for yourself. Every time you invest in yourself, it's just another bet that you place that you're going to be successful, and that this investment in yourself is going to come back at 10x or 100x of the investment that you made, because that's how confident you are that you're going to be successful with it.
Yeah, that's such awesome advice. I so believe in that. So let me wrap this up with one last question. So what's one thing that most ignites your soul in the work that you do?
I mean, if you would have asked me a year ago, the answer would be way different. But now I would say my son. Just if you're a parent, you know exactly what I mean. But it's just gives you entirely new fuel for everything that you do, and it gives you a much deeper reason to continue pushing yourself and improving yourself and the people around you. So that one's easy, my son.
I love that. Well, listen, Travis, I want to thank you for giving up your time to be here today and to share your wisdom. I'm truly grateful for that. And I will be sharing the link to your podcast and your social channels, because I really encourage people to follow your work. I think you're offering such a great service that I think people really need. If you want to connect, engage, and grow a network, Travis is a guy that you can learn from. So again, thanks a lot for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Of course, Joanne, this was a blast. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you, Travis.
Yes, ma'am. Happy to help. Happy to help.